Hi, this is Matthew. I'm a UPC trainer, and this channel is providing free tutorials for the aspirants who are preparing for civil service examination. And this is going to be the third video for the subject world history. And in this particular video, we will be covering two important undercurrents that actually influenced, major historical events and the political discourse of various countries. Okay, and that would be Enlightenment and Romanticism. First, we will approach this area called Enlightenment. See, basically, Enlightenment was a philosophical or an intellectual movement, okay, that occurred in the Western civilization from late 17th century onwards. Okay. But some of the major philosophers associated with Enlightenment, they happened to live during 18th century, and as a result of that, this 18th century is also addressed as the age of reason or the century of reason. Uh, there occurred, there emerged various philosophers or intellectuals that put forward, many new sets of ideas that actually influenced the political discourse of various countries thereafter. And that's the reason why we consider this, philosophical move, we call this philosophical movement as something as, enlightenment. This philosophical movement, it actually started in England, but in 18th century, France was the epicenter of this movement. And this actually emerged, this intellectual movement emerged due to two important factors. One would be the free spirit associated with Renaissance, and the second would be the development of science. Okay, the science actually created, a certain notion called scientific temper or rationality. So the free spirit associated with the Renaissance and the rationality of science actually triggered an intellectual movement known as Enlightenment. And in order to understand it, we'll have to discuss some of the important principles, important notions that was so dear to almost all the philosophers. Okay. See, by 18th century onwards, science was the moving subject. Okay, science was the important subject where all people discussed and debate by around 17th century. Okay. So due to the development of science, people came to understand that there were some, universal laws associated with the nature, and these universal laws actually functions very properly. Okay, and people began to think that if some sort of universal laws are applicable to the nature, and if these universal laws could make the nature perfect and in fine balance, then there should be some universal laws, okay, that could solve the problems of humanity. So the enlightenment itself, it actually started with this notion. Okay, we'll have to adopt some scientific method to end the problems of human beings. Okay, so earlier that when problems emerged in the human way of life, people usually look to religion, okay, for refuge or for solutions. But the enlightenment thinkers, these intellectuals, they called for the adoption of scientific methods to solve the problems of humanity, especially the human misery. Okay. And when they began to apply, the scientific methods to social sciences, okay, they began to realize that the fundamental factor for the misery of the common man was he was not represented in the political systems across the world. Okay, we are talking about some centuries where many of the monarchs ruled their land on the principle I am the land and I am the law. Okay, so politics was actually a monopoly of a few monarchs and a few nobles. So these thinkers, they put forward the notion that if you want to end the misery of the common man, then you should give him political representation. So in order to ensure political representation, in order to have political representation in place, these philosophers, they began to attack the huge concentration of powers at the hands of monarchs. Okay, and they put forward solutions as well. Okay, they told the common population that the best way to end the human misery would be the adoption of a constitutional rule, okay, in the political systems across the world. Okay, and they also pitched for human rights, just because it would act as a bulwark towards the concentration of power. Okay, and encouraged by all these philosophies, people began to attack the political authority, okay, of the existing times, and the notion which was used by these few elites to legitimize their rule, that was the divine right of kingship. Okay, then another important aspect associated with these philosophers were that they regularly tried to change the morality of the societies, because they knew a basic fact that public morality will always influence the lawmaking process. Okay, and as a result of that, they put forward an important notion that, see, the public morality should be based on rationality and humanism rather than religion or culture. Okay, and its impact is even witnessed in some of the contemporary societies of 21st century. For example, in India, we managed to repeal Article 377, which criminalized homosexuality. Okay, we managed to decriminalize homosexuality just because that the public morality had changed from religion or culture to a morality based on rationality and humanism. Okay, so these types of arguments or notions were first put forward by these intellectuals or these philosophers. Then they all pitch for equitable access to resources and knowledge. Okay, so if you want to end human misery, they understood that the main factor behind all these miseries and inequalities would be the inequitable access to resources or knowledge was made the monopoly of the church, and resources were made the monopoly of monarchs and few nobles. And the first practical expression of this idea, it manifested into the creation of encyclopedia. Okay, encyclopedia was created by a famous philosopher named Dennis Diderot, so that knowledge, okay, accumulated by the humanity, is available in a single book, so that every individual would be able to know the issues associated with his or her problems. And uh, by giving access to that knowledge, he thought that human beings will be able to solve their problems as well. Okay, so to solve problems, Dennis Diderot believed that people should have access to knowledge. Okay, and for that he tried to bring all the accumulated knowledge of humanity into a single textbook. Okay, and this actually emerged as the famous encyclopedia. And the initial phase actually happened in England. Okay, the famous physicist Isaac Newton actually created the foundation structure for this intellectual movement. In his legendary textbook, Principia Mathematica, he was the person who first argued that there has to be some universal laws okay, to make the societies perfect, because we are a part of the nature, and the nature and this world all work on the principle of some the balance of some universal laws. So inspired by science, he was the person who first put forward this notion. Okay, we have to find some universal laws, just like the universal laws of nature, so to make our societies in proper balance and to make our societies perfect. Then much more clarity was given by another English philosopher named John Locke. Okay, Isaac Newton's philosophy was basically a call, okay, to find out these universal laws, but it was John Locke who actually gave much more clarity regarding this matter. In his legendary work, his essay concerning human understanding, he brought out two important principles: okay, the natural rights of human beings and constitutional rule. Okay, he argued that just by the virtue of a human being, we all enjoy some inalienable rights. Okay, and he addressed it as the natural rights of human beings. And these natural rights, it was according to him, it was not the gift of a monarch or a state. Okay, just being the by the virtue of a human being, we have some inalienable rights. Nobody has the right to take away that rights, and these rights are not the blessings of any political system. These are some of the, there should be some inalienable rights where no political system could take away. Okay, and for that he also provided a solution. He argued for constitutional rule, okay, to ensure the continuation of the enjoyment of these inalienable rights. Okay, so basically the idea behind constitution is to provide limited government. Okay, in political philosophy, limited government simply means that the power of the government should be limited. The power of the government should be limited by making written laws or constitutions, or by providing political conventions. There should be power to the state or the government, but that power should be limited so that they will not intrude into the private life of human beings. Okay, so that they will not overuse, or they will not misuse that power to violate the natural rights of human beings. Okay, so he was the person who first came up with the idea of the notion, or idea or the notion of constitutional rule. And by 18th century, many French philosophers, okay, they gave much more clarity, okay, to this concept called constitutional rule. And we'll have to give the bulk of the credit to this French philosopher, Baron de Montesquieu. Okay, his work is known as Spirit de Louis. Okay, he wrote a textbook. It is known as Spirit de Louis, and worldwide it is commonly called as Spirit of Laws. Okay, the English translation of Spirit de Louis is Spirit of Laws. I think even in polity, you might have come across the name of this textbook, Spirit of Laws. In this textbook, he actually put forward a doctrine called separation of powers. He argued that the entire powers, entire functions of a state should not be concentrated on a single hand. On the other hand, there should be at least three organs for a government. Okay, namely legislature, executive, and judiciary. And these three organs, they should work on the principle checks and balance system. Okay, legislature should be checked by the judiciary, judiciary should be checked by the executive, and executive should be checked by the legislature. And a proper checks and balance system between these three organs would prevent the concentration of power, and it will ensure some sort of constitutional rule in societies. Okay, so Montesquieu actually gave much more clarity regarding the practicality of constitutional rule. And the first manifestation of Montesquieu's principle could be found in American Constitution. Then came again, we discussed about him, Dennis Diderot. Okay. He was the person who actually brought out the textbook encyclopedia. His aim was to, collect all the knowledge and wisdom, okay, accumulated by the humanity, and to make it available in a single textbook. Okay, he actually did it to end the monopoly of the Roman Catholic Church over knowledge in France. Okay, so his argument was that people should ask questions for themselves, okay, regarding their problems surrounding them, and they should be able to come up with an answer to, and for that they should have access to knowledge. Then I shall introduce you another important philosopher. He was German by birth. His name was Immanuel Kant. Okay, his contribution was largely in the field of public morality. His thinkings, his ideas actually revolutionized the public morality in the West. Okay, in his legendary textbook Critique of Pure Reason, he argued that reason, human reason, okay, the rationality of our mind should be the source of morality rather than religion. That was a very revolutionary idea during he lived in 19th century, during 19th century, because during that point of time religion and the culture was the source of morality. Okay, and he argued, he called the public to change that base of morality, and it later on got manifested in the public life and the political discourse of Western civilization. And since he itself was a philosopher of the Enlightenment period, he tried to give a clarification to this term Enlightenment. Okay, according to him, Enlightenment is some sort of freedom, okay, to use one's own intelligence and emergence from his self-imposed immaturity. That was the clarification given by Immanuel Kant, okay, about the idea of enlightenment. Okay, and some of the historians are of the opinion that he could be considered as the first prominent atheist of the modern world. Then came Voltaire, okay, another important French philosopher. His original name is Francois Marie Auret, okay, and popularly he is called as Voltaire. Voltaire was actually a champion of individual rights and individualism. Okay, so when it comes to the tussle between individual rights versus family or community, he always sided with the individual entity. Okay, once he remarked like this: "Though I disagree with what you say, but I shall passionately defend to the end your right to say it." See, this remark of Voltaire, it even inspired the liberals of 21st century. Okay. But the fury of the Voltaire mainly fell on the Roman Catholic Church, because the Roman Catholic Church, especially in France during this point of time, he lived just prior to the French Revolution. Okay, okay, so the Roman Catholic Church during that point of time had abused the power, okay, enjoyed by them. Okay, they held almost one-fifth of the total land in France. Okay, with the upper clergy, they led a very luxurious life. They had no, you know, right to educate or to give moral lessons to the population, and they were exempted from taxes, and all these things. That they had no empathy to the common population, and as a result of that, he once called the church as an infamous thing. He was not fond of Christianity as well. Okay, he once called Christianity as a glorified superstition. But it doesn't mean that Voltaire was an atheist. In fact, Voltaire had belief in some sort of a notion called divine sovereignty. Okay, be a good man and worship God, was once said by Voltaire. Okay, and in one instance, he even remarked like this: "If God doesn't exist, it will be necessary to create him." Okay, but unfortunately, many of the individuals in the 21st century, they consider Voltaire as some sort of an atheist, and even the Christian churches, they boast. Like that, we converted the house of Voltaire into the headquarters of Bible Society. It is true. At present, the house of Voltaire is the headquarters of the Bible Society, and the Christian churches is always boast about that change. But it doesn't. I don't know why they are giving a boast about that thing, because he actually only attacked the abuse of the church. He never criticized or he never questioned the existence of God. Okay, but he actually criticized Roman Catholic Church as well as Christianity. Okay. Then, with respect to the political ideas, Voltaire was in factly an advocate of enlightened despotism. Okay, okay. See, enlightened despotism. It was because, since Voltaire attacked monarch and the church, he had to flee from France, and it was the Frederick of the Great, okay, who was ruling the medieval kingdom called Prussia. He actually gave him asylum. Okay, it was the Frederick the Great who gave him asylum in Prussia, and as a result of that, his viewpoint, okay, his political viewpoint was enlightened despotism. Okay, according to him, monarchy as such is not a bad thing. Okay, monarchy became an issue when corrupt and cruel individuals, okay, ascend the throne. Okay, so his solution to the problems associated with the monarchical rule was enlightened despotism. And one thing I would like to add here is the political solution given by Baron de Montesquieu was constitutional monarchy. Okay. Montesquieu actually preferred constitutional monarchy, and big and separation of powers. Okay, but Voltaire, he actually believed in enlightened despotism. Then came the most important philosopher associated with Enlightenment. He is called by the name Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Okay. Rousseau, he was basically, an ardent lover of nature. Okay. He was of the opinion that, civilization had made man sick. Okay. And his motto was, we should go back to nature. Okay. The social life is the problem. The civilization is the problem for all, is the inherent problem for almost all the problems associated with humanity. So he actually gave a call, okay, go back to nature. And he was also, okay, he also, vehemently attacked inequality occurred in the society. Again, he pointed out to social life and civilization, you know as the root cause for all these phenomena. And his viewpoint was that no citizen should be rich enough to be able to buy another, and none poor enough to be forced to sell him. Okay. This idea actually later on influenced the socialist of 19th century. And all these ideas of Rousseau could be found in his textbook named Discourse on the Origin of Inequality. Okay. Rousseau also had some profound views on education, and his views on education should be seen in his textbook Emily. In Emily, he argued that the fundamental aim of education should be to make a child industrious. Okay, and for that, he argued that children should be educated as per the wills and the desires of the children. But the most important textbook, okay, created by Rousseau was Social Contract. Okay. This textbook, it started with the legendary phrase, man is born free and he is everywhere in chains. And this textbook, Social Contract, is considered as the Bible of French Revolution also. Okay. And we will discuss why it is called as the Bible of French Revolution. Okay. So in Social Contract, Rousseau came up with a concept called the general will. Okay, the commonly accepted will, okay, in a society is known as general will, and he was a strong supporter of general will. Okay, Rousseau propounded that general will is actually became a necessity. Okay, Rousseau actually favored the imposition of general will on individuals. He actually favored the imposition of general will on individuals. He argued that general imposition of general will, became a necessity due to the advent of social life. Okay, we are no longer we drifted away from nature, and we are now living a social life. So, in order to have a smooth functioning of the social life, individuals in the society have to keep promises. Okay. And if promises should be kept in a society, then everyone should be brought in line with the general will. Okay. And he again argued that individual, when it comes to a conflict between individual will and general will, you should always support the general will, because the individual will may harm an individual. Okay, but the general will never harm an individual. That was the argument put forward by Rousseau. Okay, for example, smoking, drinking, etc. Those are the individual wills of the people, but it has the potential to harm that individual also. Okay, but the general will would never harm, individual. That was actually the argument of Rousseau. And why this is called as or why this book became the Bible of French Revolution is because, he argued that even the king should be brought in line with the general will. Okay. He also pointed out that, if the king is hesitant to be in line with the general will, then the people have every right to remove that king. Okay. He was the first person in the Europe during 18th century who spoke about the removal of kings. Okay, his opinion was that if king or a monarch, if he does not fall in line with the general will, then the people has every right to remove that king. See, no one before had ever spoke about the removal of overthrow of king. Okay. Montesquieu was in favor of constitutional monarchy. Voltaire was in favor of enlightened despotism, and Rousseau did not care about monarchies at all. Okay, he said people have every right. Okay, his viewpoint was very clear. The people have every right. See, we are speaking about a century where monarchies was ruling, okay, or the monarchical rule was legitimized by religions due to a principle called divine right of kingship. Almost all the monarchs in ancient and medieval world, they ruled on the basis of this principle, divine right of kingship. So any act against the state, and this divine right of kingship, this principle was actually sanctified by almost all religions. Okay, in Europe, Christianity sanctified this principle by propounding another theory called hierarchy of being. Okay, the inequality in the society is actually God willing. That was the teachings as per hierarchy of being. Okay, God had created a social hierarchy. Okay, first come God, then come his angels, then come king, then come bishop, then come man, then come woman, then come slaves. That was the hierarchy. Okay, that was the teachings of Christianity during medieval period, and that teaching is known as hierarchy of being. So anyone who acted against the monarch was considered as anti-social and anti-religious. He could be charged for treason and blasphemy. Okay, and it was in that period. So in that period, Rousseau argued about the removal of monarch. This actually created a revolutionary fire in the common man in France during 18th century. That is the reason we consider social contract as the Bible of French Revolution. And all these, due to all these reasons, a scholar named Johnson one remark. Okay, in the first place, Rousseau spoke about words that could never be unspoken, and in second, he kindled a hope that could never be extinguished. Okay, that was the contribution of Rousseau. But you should also understand that this concept of general will propounded by Rousseau was later on abused by despotic rulers in 19th century. Okay, in the name of bringing people in line with the general will. Okay, many of their arbitrary actions were justified. Okay, by themselves, by those rulers. Okay, by arguing that these actions are necessary to bring people in line with the general will, because the common population were actually inspired by social contract by in 19th century, and the monarchs and the despotic rulers of Europe in 19th century, they use the same argument for their despotic and arbitrary actions. Okay, so there are some criticisms associated with social contract also. I just want to inform you guys regarding that. Now, since we are discussing enlightenment, we should also understand the contribution of this intellectual movement or this philosophical movement. Okay. The first thing was it attacked the abuse of the state and church. Okay, and due to the ideological attack on the abuse of state and church, it gave much more sanctity to the individual agencies of human beings. Okay, so that is a significant contribution of enlightenment. Then this intellectual movement actually helped to change the public morality. Okay, so and it changed to an extent that in 21st century Europe or in the West, the fundamental unit of politics and society had become individual rather than family or community. It was not the case during medieval period. Okay, it is not the case even in many Afro-Asian societies. Okay, so in during ancient and medieval period, the fundamental unit of society and polity was either family or community. Okay, even today, even the modern day India follow this family or institution as its basic unit when it comes to society and polity. But in Europe, we can see that it has changed to individual. Okay, that is because of enlightenment. Okay. Then this enlightenment, it formed the base of political ideologies. Okay, all this from the base of political ideology. Almost all political ideologies developed in the 19th century, be classical liberalism or socialism or French conservatism. All these political ideologies were inspired by either of any of the philosophers which we discussed this right now. Okay, so these are some of the contributions. Okay, in association with enlightenment. Now I think we can move on to another important movement or an undercurrent that actually helped it actually influenced many of the historical events or the political discourse of humanity, and that would be Romanticism. Okay, Romanticism, it actually happened just after Enlightenment. Okay, and Romanticism emerged in European societies by 19th century, and it later on affected almost all societies of the world, even India. Okay, it was basically a literary or an artistic movement. Okay, and Romanticism was actually the product of industrialization. Okay, because it was in 19th century, industrialization. Almost all the societies began to get influenced by industrial revolution or industrialization, and that is why Romanticism emerged only in 19th century. Okay, it was basically the product of industrialization, especially the initial hardships created by industrialization. Do you see, during the initial phases of industrialization, the common man had to suffer a lot. Okay, the people were forced to work for 14 or 16 hours a day. Even children below the age 9 or 10, they were forced to work more than 12 hours a day. And children were mainly employed in mines. Okay, because it is easy to give it is easy to get through children in small holes. Okay, so that to ensure digging. So even children had to face the hardships associated with the initial phases of industrial revolution. These people, they lived in closed compartments in an extremely unhygiene atmosphere. So the outbreak of endemics like plague was quite common among the working class. And so there was no euphoria associated with industrialization during 18th or 19th century. Even the European society, they began to enjoy the fruits of industrialization only during 20th century. Okay, so in 18th and 19th century, industrialization was a phenomena that actually gave only hardships to the common population. Okay, so people began to despise this new change that actually made their life miserable. So there was a tendency to seek refuge. Okay, or there was a tendency to escape from this reality, and this tendency to escape from industrialization actually manifested as Romanticism by middle 19th century. Romanticism is all about a mindset and a way of feeling. Okay, and this mindset and a way of feeling is characterized by high emotions. Okay, this literary and artistic movement is characterized by intense emotions portrayed in them. Okay, and now we are going to look into the basic features of Romanticism. Okay, so an easy way to understand Romanticism is asking a simple question. Okay, are you a romantic? Okay, are you and me a romantic? Just try to ask that question because you are going to find out the answer very soon. Okay. See, the pioneer romantic of Europe was Rousseau. Okay, and his textbook Emily. Okay, it actually saw the seeds of romanticism in the world. Okay, so Rousseau was living in a time when industrialization had set his foot. Okay, and the life of the common man was actually quite struggling due to industrialization. And industrialization was the product of scientific development, and the development of science and the resultant industrialization actually created a much more robust, rational and mechanical world. Okay, so Rousseau was actually against this rational and mechanical world because it only produced hardships. Okay, on the other hand, instead of this mechanical world, Rousseau emphasized on the child, which is the embodiment of everything pure, innocent, and sweet. Okay, and all these ideas could be found in his textbook Emily. And as a result of that, we consider Rousseau as the person who saw the seeds of romanticism in this world. Then another important romantic figure of 19th century was a German, writer named Goethe. His legendary work was Sorrows of Young Werther. Napoleon once remarked Sorrows of Young Werther as the greatest piece in European literature. Okay, see, this novel, it actually the storyline is basically associated with a young lover, a young man who loved a married woman. That is the base of the storyline of this textbook. Okay. See, during that point of time, that love was highly impracticable. Okay, but still, and the love of the Werther did not bear fruit also. But still, in this textbook, Goethe sided with that helpless young man. Okay, he was actually giving a call to embrace the madness and love instead of rationality. Okay, an idea about following your heart rather than your brain is also inherent in this legendary textbook Sorrows of Young Worth. Okay, so almost all the romantics are of the same phenomenon. Okay, they don't give up, they fall in the madness of love instead of the rationality of the life. Okay. Then came the legend of Thomas Chatterton. Thomas Chatterton was a young man who committed suicide at the tender age of 17. The reason for that, he wanted to become a poet, but his family was forcing him to pursue legal education. So he could not stand that mental pressure, and he committed suicide at the tender age of 17. And after his suicide, his poems began to get published and this Chatterton became a huge figure in the cultural life of England. Okay. And after that, there began to emerge a cult in England, and these similar cults began to appear across the world. A cult which is characterized by sympathy. Okay, the followers who usually sympathizes with the doomed artist rather than the rich and successful individuals. Okay, the cult around Van Gogh or Jim Morrison, okay, are all the continuation of this trend. Okay, so this trend which is associated with sympathizing with the doomed artist, it actually started with the suicide of Thomas Chatterton. Then came another English poet named William Wordsworth. Okay. I think the poems of William Wordsworth are even taught in schools. Okay. He was a famous English poet who actually who had an inherent hatred towards an industrial world. Okay. Wordsworth even led a protest against the laying of a railway line through his village. Okay, so if you look into the poems of William Wordsworth, we can see an attitude, a notion, or a call to embrace the beauty and simplicity of village life rather than going behind the mechanical world. Okay, so almost all the romantics, okay, later on, so this trait is also a prominent one in romanticism. Okay, embracing the beauty and simplicity of village life. Then another important romantic figure was a French painter named Paul Gauguin. Okay, he actually, just like Rousseau, he despised this civilization. Okay, he left France to the high seas of Pacific. Okay, to live a very simple way of life, to go back to nature, and his paintings are full of relaxed and barely clothed native men and women who inhabited the Pacific islands. Okay, so by portraying those relaxed but barely clothed women, by portraying them, he was actually trying to give a message that civilization had made us sick. We had to go back to nature. We might lose many material things, but we'll be happy and relaxed. Okay, so his call was also escape from civilization. I think you might have got a basic understanding about romanticism. So basically, if you are a romantic, then you will hate this civilization. Okay, you will hate civilization. You will be an ardent lover of nature. Okay, then you will have more sympathy to madness and love rather than rationality of this life. Okay, then you will appreciate the beauty and simplicity of village life. Okay, so these are the basic characteristics of romanticism. It is also important for a student of history to have a basic understanding about the effects that was produced due to romanticism. Initially, it revived medievalism in Europe. Okay, the medieval Gothic architecture began to get revived in Europe and in the colonies established by European powers. Okay, even in India, we can see structures constructed as per Gothic architecture. I will give it as a homework. Please go through it. Two important structures. Okay, it still survive. Okay, are constructed along this style of architecture, Gothic architecture. Then people began to renew their interest in folk traditions and villages. That was another effect of romanticism. And environmentalism, okay, the call to protect Mother Nature. It is actually a direct product of romanticism. But the most important product of romanticism, or why we study romanticism in world history, is that it had a significant political manifestation. Okay. The political manifestation of romanticism was nationalism. Okay, see, 19th century for Europe, 19th century was actually the century of nationalism, just because of this phenomenon, romanticism. Okay, see, romanticism, as we said earlier, romanticism is actually a mindset which is characterized by intense emotions. It is highly emotional in nature. Okay, so due to the effect of romanticism, there began to emerge an emotional attachment towards one's mother country, language, or religion. Okay, people belonging to same race or same language. Okay, or same land, they began to have some sort of emotional attachment. Okay, so this emotional attachment between people due to their common shared interest was actually due to romanticism. And this emotional attachment, this form of emotional attachment, later on enabled social cohesion on these lines. Okay, and that actually manifested as nationalism in Europe. Okay, take the example of France. Okay, they consider themselves as a nation because they believe that they belong to a single race. They have same race, same religion, that is Roman Catholic Church, and same language, French language. Take the example of Germany. They believe that Germans form a single race, and they follow, almost majority of them are follow Protestant Christianity, and their language is German. So this type of emotional attachment led to it politically manifested as nationalism. And this nationalism also had some practical outcomes as well. It never limited itself as an ideology. It had some practical outcomes as well, and that was the formation of nation states in Europe. Okay, be the Germany or Italy. Okay, Germany and Italy came into existence only in 1871. Okay, and they were formed along nationalistic lines. Okay, and we can give credit to the establishment of those entities to nationalism and romanticism. The notion of nation states, it again led to the retrieval of Ottomans from Balkans. Okay, the entire Balkan region was once colonized by Ottoman Turks, but nationalism became a strong political force during 19th century. Okay, and Romanticism forced the public of Britain and France to sympathize with the people of Europe, okay, to sympathize with the Christian people of Eastern Europe who were under some sort of Muslim rule. Okay, so the public opinion in Britain and France, okay, who were powerful states in the world. The public opinion in those countries became sympathetic towards the struggle of Eastern European people. Okay, the Western European people in the Western European countries, they began to sympathize with the Eastern European people because they were basically following the same religion, Christianity. Okay, yeah. So the nations like Britain, France, Italy, Germany, they all became they began to favor the independence of Eastern Europe from Ottoman Empire, and the people of Balkans also they got empowered due to this political ideology called nationalism. Okay. Uh, it actually empowered them to overthrow a foreign rule. Okay, and nation states were formed in Eastern Europe as well. Okay, the first state to overthrow the Ottoman yoke was Greece. It happened in 1829. Then Serbia followed the same trend. Then Romania, Bulgaria. Okay, all these states in the Eastern Europe was formed, and almost all these states are formed along nationalistic lines. Okay, in Serbia, Serbia is actually a country for the Serb people. Okay, Greece is actually a country for the Greek people. There, Greeks form the majority. Bulgaria, in Bulgaria, the Bulgarians form the majority. Okay, same race, same language, and same religion. Okay, some sort of exclusive nationalism could be found in Europe due to Romanticism, and this actually resulted in the weakening of Ottoman Empire in Balkans. That's the reason why we study Romanticism in association with world history. So that's all for this video. Thank you for your time and patience. I would like comments, okay, constructive feedbacks about these videos. And if you want to get printed notes, okay, simplified and beautiful printed notes, you can mail us on easymains@gmail.com. Thank you.